Hi, I'm Leslie from All You Studio. Empower yourself against aggression and assault as we teach you easy to learn self-defense techniques. Power up!
Madison County mother, who was an advocate for domestic violence victims, is dead. The woman's ex-boyfriend is charged with killing her and shooting a man on Thanksgiving Day.
I just don't get it. All I was doing was trying to go out on a date.
Thanksgiving Day, 2021, Farmersville, Illinois, a village of barely 1,500 people. At 12:42 in the afternoon, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department received a call for a welfare check at a house on Nobby Street. The people asking for that check were worried. A woman named Leslie Reeves had gone on a first date the night before. She hadn't come home. Nobody had heard from her. The man she'd been with, a man she had only just met, wasn't answering his phone either. When deputies arrived at that house, they found Leslie dead in the living room. She had been shot in the head. The man she'd been on the date with, Chris Smith, was found barely conscious on the kitchen floor, also shot in the head. He had been lying there for approximately 14 hours. His 3-year-old Beagle Terrier mix, a dog named Tiki, had stayed curled up against him the entire time. Leslie's best friend, Nanette Stoiber, was sitting in her car outside when the detective walked over to her. She showed him a photo of Leslie on her phone. He looked at it, then back at her, and said, "I'm sorry to have to tell you this. Your friend has been murdered." He told her. She went quickly. Here is what set this investigation apart from that first afternoon. The man investigators focused on within hours of finding the bodies wasn't a stranger to Leslie Reeves. He was someone who had been part of her life, and according to prosecutors, he had spent the hours before the attack finding out exactly where she was going, and then making his way there. This is the mystery question that ran through this entire case. Not simply who killed Leslie Reeves, but how a man who told detectives he had never even heard of Farmersville ended up connected to a house 75 miles from his own home, on the same night Leslie drove there for a first date. Leslie Jane Reeves was 45 years old. She had grown up in town and country Missouri, earned a master's degree in engineering, and eventually built a life in Troy, Illinois. At some point she stepped away from engineering entirely and opened All You Studio and Party Place in Troy, a space where women could take yoga classes, Pilates, fitness training, and chair dancing. She also taught self-defense and firearms. Not long before she was killed, she organized a class called Girls with Guns. But what defined Leslie in her community wasn't the business itself. It was what the business represented. Leslie worked closely with domestic violence organizations, shelters, counselors, advocates. She served on a shelter board. She helped women leave dangerous situations, sometimes organizing classes at undisclosed locations so that only the invited attendees would know where to show up. Confidentiality, as the director of the Troy Chamber described it, sometimes meant the difference between safety and harm for her clients. Dawn Mushel, who knew her through the chamber, described her as powerful, funny, gracious, and deeply committed. She was a mother of 2 middle school-aged children. Friends said she lived for them. The painful irony of how she died would not escape anyone who had known her work. Leslie had also experienced unwanted attention in her own life before November 2021. Court records from 2019 show she had obtained a no-contact order against a man named Mark Leonard after accusing him of stalking. That order was later dismissed. Investigators were aware of that history, but from the very beginning of the case, the name that kept surfacing wasn't Leonard. It was Robert Tarr, Bobby, as people who knew him called him. Leslie and Bobby had been in an on and off dating relationship. They both lived in the same general area, Tarr in Collinsville, a roughly 15-minute drive from Leslie's home in Troy. Friends described the relationship as turbulent and said it had ended. Leslie had told Nanette Stoiber she was planning to block Tarr from all communication. She had told her friend Amy Steinhauer something even more specific, that weeks before Thanksgiving, she had been on a date with another man, and Tarr had shown up. According to Steinhauer, Leslie had said she was afraid of him, that she had grown deeply concerned about his behavior and what he might do. The fear was specific enough that she had discussed it directly with more than one person close to her. Chris Smith was 48 and had lived in Farmersville long enough that people there knew him by name. He worked for a pool contractor. He was divorced. He was described by people in the area as friendly, someone who mostly kept to himself. He'd met Leslie online, This was their first time meeting in person. The plan for November 24, 2021, was simple. A friend of Chris's was playing music at the Uptown Saloon in Farmersville that evening. He invited Leslie to come out. They spent time there, talked, had drinks. By every account from people who knew her, Leslie was looking forward to it. Steiber later told CBS News that Leslie had been excited about it, that she thought it might be a real connection. Sometime after the bar, the two of them walked the few blocks back to Chris's home. It was past midnight. They were in the kitchen, warming up a frozen pizza. That same night, while Leslie and Chris were inside that house, prosecutors argued Bobby Tarr already knew where they were. The first concrete piece of evidence came from something Tarr himself had done that evening. A friend had contacted him and mentioned that Leslie was driving an hour away from home for Thanksgiving. Tarr's response was found on his phone and entered into evidence at trial. He texted back, "I don't feel like she would drive that far for a party or go out with a girlfriend. I think it's for a dude." That message was sent on the evening of November 24th. By the early hours of November 25, Leslie Reeves was dead. According to the prosecution's case, built from witness testimony, phone records, traffic surveillance, and physical evidence, Tarr drove north from Collinsville to Farmersville that night. His daughter told investigators that he left their home twice on November 24th, first around 6 p.m. and again around 9:15 p.m. After the second departure, she became worried enough that she went to stay at her grandparents' house nearby. Her grandmother sent Tarr a text. He replied that he was driving around Fairview Heights, just thinking. At approximately 2:45 in the morning, Thanksgiving morning, she said her father woke her. He was doing laundry. Prosecutors argued that while he was supposed to be thinking and driving, he was actually in Farmersville, at the back door of Chris Smith's house. Based on evidence presented at trial, Tarr forced his way toward the storm door at the rear of the home. Leslie moved the refrigerator against the door. Chris tried to hold it shut. Tarr fired through the door. The bullet struck Chris in the head. Prosecutors then argued Tarr entered the house, moved through it, and found Leslie in the living room. She had run behind the Christmas tree in the corner. According to testimony presented at trial, she was shot in the back of the head. Illinois State Police crime scene investigator Josh Easton, who had worked more than 1,800 crime scenes over the course of his career, later described what he found inside that house as one of the most horrific scenes he had ever attended. Blood across the cabinets, the refrigerator, the countertops, corner to corner through the kitchen. Ticky, Chris's dog, stayed next to him on the floor for the rest of that night. On Thanksgiving afternoon, Nanette Steiber called 911 because she couldn't reach Leslie. She drove to Farmersville and sat in her car outside the house, watching deputies arrive. She saw Chris taken away in an ambulance. She waited for Leslie to come out. A detective walked over to her car instead. From the moment investigators arrived, the question they kept returning to was the same one running through this entire case. How did someone from Leslie's past know where she was going? The answer came from multiple directions, and each one was harder to explain away than the last. The first lead didn't come from investigators working backward. It came from Amy Steinhauer. When she heard what had happened on Thanksgiving morning, she called the sheriff's office and gave them Bobby Tarr's name before detectives had even identified a suspect publicly. Nanette Steiber, when asked by investigators, said the same thing. That night, deputies drove to Tarr's home in Collinsville. According to CBS News, Tarr never asked why they wanted to speak with him. He agreed to go to the police station without a lawyer. During the recorded interrogation, Detective Jeff Roach told Tarr that Leslie was dead. "What?" Tarr said. "How did she die?" Roach told him she had been murdered. Tarr said he wasn't involved in anything. Then Roach asked the question that would become central to the case. He asked Tarr if he knew where Farmersville, Illinois was. Tarr's answer: "No, I can't say that I do. Never been there, never heard of it." He also told detectives he and Leslie were still together, that their relationship wasn't over. Friends and family had said the opposite. When Roach asked if they had problems, Tarr said, "No worse than any average couple." His daughter had already told investigators something different about the night before, and what was on his phone was different still. Investigators recovered deleted activity from Tarr's device. The deleted searches included Christopher Smith's name and Smith's address. He had also searched whether police could track a cell phone through a VPN, and then deleted that search as well. That specific detail, not just that he searched for Smith, but that he searched how to avoid being caught while doing it, was among the evidence summarized in the 2026 Illinois Appellate Court decision affirming the conviction. His phone had communicated with a cell tower near Farmersville on the night of November 24th and into November 25th. Traffic cameras, license plate readers, recorded his white Volkswagen Jetta leaving the Collinsville area in the evening hours and appearing near Farmersville at approximately 12:09 in the morning. He said he had never heard of Farmersville. His car was recorded near it. His phone was pinging a tower beside it. His phone contained deleted searches for the address of the man Leslie was with that night, and those searches had been wiped after he searched how to hide from investigators. At a certain point during the investigation, Tarr changed his account. He acknowledged he had followed Leslie to Farmersville and said he parked in front of her van outside Chris's house, but insisted he never went inside. He said he simply left and never returned. That story had its own problems. It confirmed he had lied initially when he said he'd never been to Farmersville, and it placed him at the exact location where the murders occurred, in the middle of the night, when he claimed to be home or driving around thinking. The prosecution's position was that the physical evidence made the rest of his account impossible to sustain. The firearm that fired the bullets recovered from Leslie Reeves' body was found on Tarr's property. It was a Springfield Armory Hellcat, a 9mm handgun. Tarr later told CBS News, when he spoke about the case, that the gun had belonged to Leslie. But Leslie's friend Howard Bolton, who had trained with her at the Girls with Guns class she organized, said he had never seen her bring a Hellcat to any training. He disputed that she owned one, and then there was a detail that made Tarr's claim even harder to accept. Leslie's DNA was found on the guide rod of the weapon. Bolton's assessment, shared with CBS, was that the only explanation for her DNA being on that component was if the gun had been fired at her at extremely close range. Tarr's brother, Adam Tarr, had separately provided investigators with a 9mm firearm. The accessories matched evidence recovered from the crime scene. The chain prosecutors presented to the jury ran from Bobby Tarr's text on the evening of November 24th, "I think it's for a dude," through his daughter's account of him leaving the house twice, through his phone pinging a tower near Farmersville, through traffic cameras placing his car on that route past midnight, through deleted searches for Chris Smith's name and address, through a deleted search on how to avoid phone tracking, through a weapon found on his property, through that weapon's connection to the bullets that killed Leslie. None of those pieces, individually, described what happened inside Chris Smith's house. Together, the prosecution argued, they described who put it in motion. The trial opened on April 23, 2024, in the Montgomery County Courthouse in Hillsborough. A jury of 8 women and 6 men heard the case. State's Attorney Andrew Affronti and Special Prosecutor Derek Dion led the prosecution. The defense did not call a single witness. They relied entirely on the argument that the state had not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours.
Today, a man charged with killing his ex-girlfriend was found guilty of murder and attempted murder. Robert Tarr shot and killed Leslie Reeves and critically hurt Christopher Smith. It happened in Montgomery County, Illinois, the day before Thanksgiving in 2021. Both had just returned to Smith's home after their first date.
Guilty. First-degree murder. Attempted first-degree murder. 2 weapons-related charges. All of them. Chris Smith was not in the courtroom for the verdict. He attended sentencing instead. And standing up to face the man convicted of shooting him, Chris described what the last 3 years had looked like.
Man, look at hell.
Chris Smith says he's living the worst time of his life.
I went from being a single dad to small business owner, living your everyday, American dream. I did nothing wrong.
On the night before Thanksgiving, Smith and Leslie Reeves were excited to go on their first date at a bar in Farmersville, Illinois. Chris had no idea it would be their last.
I just don't get it. All I was doing was trying to go out on a date.
The next day, relatives say a friend of Leslie Reeves called the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office and asked for a welfare check at Chris's Farmersville home. Deputies went there and found Reeves shot to death in the living room.
I don't remember anything from that night whatsoever at all. No. Thank God.
A critically wounded Chris was discovered in the kitchen. A bullet is still on his brain.
My neighbor found me on the floor 14 hours later with my dog cuddled up next to me, trying to keep you warm.
3 months after the shooting, Smith is now paralyzed on the left side of his body, unable to walk, and he's struggling emotionally. He's also now undergoing rehabilitation 3 times a week and staying with his parents.
That's all I can do right there. That's all the feel. I mean, I'm starting over from scratch. I'm trying to make my muscles relearn everything again.
We are praying for him. And as a mom, I want to make everything right for him, but I can't.
He said that while he was in a medically induced coma, he didn't wake until January. Someone came to his house and took his guitars, his amplifiers, his above-ground pool. His home was later sold at auction and demolished. Nothing is there now but an empty lot. He lost his truck. He lost his ability to work. He said plainly, "I've literally lost my life without being killed." The injuries he listed were extensive: 6 brain surgeries, 2 massive strokes, left side paralysis that has never fully resolved, a bullet still lodged in his brain that doctors determined could not be safely removed, months of medically induced unconsciousness, followed by months more of rehabilitation that continues to this day. Chris also told the court that he had no memory of November 24, 2021, no memory of the bar, of the pizza, of Leslie Reeves. He was told afterward, after he woke from the coma, that the woman he had met online, the one he had gone on a first date with, had been murdered in his living room while he was bleeding on the kitchen floor. He had to learn her name after the fact. At sentencing, Tarr spoke. He apologized to both families and continued to deny that he had shot them. The judge eventually had to stop him. Then the sentence was delivered. 25 years for first-degree murder, plus a 25-year firearm enhancement, 10 years for attempted first-degree murder, plus another 25-year firearm enhancement, all consecutive, 85 years total. Tarr appealed, arguing the sentence was excessive and that the court had improperly penalized him for maintaining his innocence. The Illinois Appellate Court reviewed those arguments in 2026 and affirmed the 85-year sentence in full. While awaiting trial, Tarr had also been indicted on 2 separate counts of solicitation of murder for hire. Prosecutors alleged he had attempted, from his jail cell, to arrange for someone to kill Chris Smith and a sheriff's deputy involved in the investigation.
Reeves' ex-boyfriend Robert Tarr was charged for her death and attempted murder for Smith. However, new indictments by a grand jury say while Tarr was in custody, he tried to hire someone to kill Smith and a Montgomery County deputy investigating the case.
We miss her laugh and her smile.
Michelle shares the latest allegations are hard to grasp, especially knowing her friend was an advocate for domestic violence victims, and she lost her life the same way she protected others.
The thing that she fought the hardest for, and then to see that how it ended.
Those charges were ultimately dismissed. What the court determined, and what the evidence at trial established, was that Leslie Reeves died because someone from her past spent the hours of her first date reconstructing where she was, and then covering the distance between them. She had spent years building something around the idea that women who recognized danger had a better chance of surviving it. She worked with people whose lives depended on knowing when to leave, when to ask for help, and how to protect themselves. She had told people in her own life that she was afraid of Bobby Tarr. She had named it clearly. She had said the words. And on November 24, 2021, none of that kept her safe. Chris Smith is still writing the book about what happened to him. He has invested in medical devices to help with mobility and says he is working to rebuild what he can from the life that was handed back to him. He told a reporter that he's trying to make the most of the lemons and limes he's been given. Nanette Stoiber, who sat in her car outside that house on Thanksgiving afternoon, waiting for her best friend to walk out, later said something that became the quiet center of everything this case raised. If it can happen to her, it could happen to anyone. Leslie went to Farmersville for a first date. That is the entire beginning of this story.